Welcome, one and all, to another episode of Pacific414 episode review. I'm your host, Mike. Hey, real quick test. Welcome, one and all, to another episode of Pacific414 episode review. I'm your host, Mike, and tonight I will be talking about part 2 of Masters of the Universe Revelation, going through episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5. I do want to thank all of you who have watched part 1 of the Masters of the Universe Revelation reaction and review covering episode 1, The Power of Grayskull. Really do appreciate that. And once again, I want to send out a special thank you to my good friend Aaron, aka TKO, for joining me for that reaction review of the first episode of the 2021 Masters of the Universe series. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get underway and start off with episode 2 of this new series, executive produced by Kevin Smith, The Poison Chalice. So, with The Poison Chalice, we find Tila and our new friend Audra. They are rummaging through some garbage, and they are looking for a particular item. They do not say what they're looking for right away, but they are looking for an item of great value, and it is inside a garbage heap. And we find our two heroes looking for it. As they're looking through the garbage pile, Audra remarks that the stench of the garbage is getting stronger, and she feels that it's something other than just the garbage itself. Well, it turns out, as you can see on your screen, that it is Stinkor. Stinkor is hiding underneath the pile of garbage, and, well, he doesn't like Tila and Audra being in his domain. So there's a fight that ensues. Tila and Audra take care of Stinkor pretty quickly. And what do they end up finding? Here, I gotta find it real quick. Well, underneath all that garbage, they find a magical glove. And they return the magical glove, as you can see right here on your screen. They return this magical glove back to its rightful owners. And Tila and Audra ask, what could Stinkor possibly want with a magical glove? Seeing at this time, a number of years have passed, and Eternia is no longer what it once was. Well, this character here, I forgot her name, but she tells Tila and Audra that rare magic artifacts like the glove are of high value on the market. So that's why the glove had to be returned. And of course, there was a stupid line in there, and it was said by Audra, no glove, no love. You know, typical typical stupid lines that you expect from Kevin Smith. But that's besides the point. The point is, Audra and Tila return this magical glove back to its rightful owners. Then, as they are leaving with their reward from recovering the magical glove, they encounter an old woman who seeks their help to find a goblet, a chalice, and this old woman is willing to pay him. So there you see Tila, Audra, and this old woman, and they're negotiating. Of course, Tila likes the fact that she's going to be getting paid twice in one day. So they end up taking this mission, but this mission is taking them to an old, familiar place. That old, familiar place that it's taking them to find this chalice is Snake Mountain. We see Snake Mountain for the first time here in Masters of the Universe Revelation. And from the outside, it looks exactly the same as it always did, or at least by the toys, and not so much the Filmation series, since we never actually saw these sections all too much. We usually only saw the snake head, and even in the 2002 He-Man series, we only saw this section right here. So their mission is to go to Snake Mountain and get the goblet, the chalice, because it belonged to a friend of this old woman who she longs for. And we get a flashback. Tila being held captive at Snake Mountain. And she has to deal with Whiplash. He-Man's there as she manages to climb up Whiplash's tail to escape. They team up to take out Whiplash, and then they focus on the wolf door right here. And then we flash forward to present day, where we see that same door, except now that same door has technology around it. It has a force field around it, unlike in the past. And, you know, it goes to show that somebody has taken over Snake Mountain. Somebody who relies heavily on technology. So as they are going through Snake Mountain, as they open up the door, lower the force field, and the way they do that is they actually go into the very same pit that Tila was thrown into in the flashback. They go down, they dig underneath, and once they dig underneath, they come out of this hatch right here, and we see a familiar robot, not him. Let's see if I can get it back there. But anyways, there's a familiar robot, a search droid, and these search droids belong to a certain henchman of Skeletor's. Here, let's go ahead and do that. So Audra and Tila are inside Snake Mountain. Tila wants them to be covert about this. They don't want to be spotted. So they're looking around. You see everybody in cloaks, and as we move on, Tila and Audra take out a couple of these guys in cloaks. They're in disguise, and as they're walking, they, of course, see Trapjaw, and they see this gentleman standing there. And who is that gentleman standing before as he's being pushed in front? Let's see if I can bring him up here. Well, as you can see, that gentleman is standing before Tri-Klops. Tri-Klops has his own cult, his own religion of people who worship technology. And inside the goblet, there are nanites. Inside the goblet, he has this character drink the goblet, and what ends up happening to this gentleman is, we are the Borg. Resistance is futile. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. I know I've already said that, but basically he turns into a servant of Tri-Klops. Tila and Audra see that. And, of course, Audra is shocked. She doesn't expect to see anything like that. Tila ends up revealing herself in order to get the goblet. Of course, Tri-Klops is none too pleased to see Tila there. Audra, of course, is scared, especially being at Snake Mountain, not really knowing what the heck is going on. So there's a fight that ensues. All of Tri-Klops' followers are going after Tila and Audra. And of course, Tila whips out this staff, which can extend into a sword or a shovel or whatever else the plot convenience is. We do end up seeing the shell of Fakor, and he's taken out. Of course, we see Whiplash at one point. Try to get to him. But we see Whiplash. Whiplash is quickly taken care of, as is Trapjaw. And of course, with that gentleman earlier, there was this little girl, but she's not exactly who she seems to be. As you can see, let me try to bring it up here. There we go. As you can see, she's been assimilated as well, so she has all sorts of hidden features now because she's drank the cup of Servos, or whatever they called it. So Tila and Audra had to fight them all off. Tila ends up killing the gentleman who was assimilated. As you can see, Tri-Klops tried to capture Audra, hold her at bay. Tila and Audra do manage to escape. They go through the swamp area where the octopus is. The octopus takes care of a few of Tri-Klops' followers, and Tila and Audra return the chalice to the old woman. So Tila and Audra end up getting their reward. And of course, the old woman says, I have one more mission for you. I can pay you even more than what you've already been paid. Yet this mission deals with magic, and Tila says that she's done with magic. She's had her fill with magic. And of course, Audra tries to talk her into taking up the mission because, unlike Tila, she would still like to be a hero. So what ends up happening is, because of Audra, Tila's convinced to go back to Castle Grayskull, which, as you can see, is in its natural form, at least in this particular series, as the elders actually had their own separate place compared to Castle Grayskull. If you go by what the 2002 series said, and even in the 83 series, Castle Grayskull was his own separate entity. So they all end up going into Castle Grayskull. The old woman is standing right in front of the sorceress. And as you can see, the sorceress is holding on to what little bit of power actually remains. But we come to find out that the sorceress and this woman are working together to try to save what little magic is left. And let me try to get a good image here. And also Cringer is there. But there we go. But as you can see, the old woman was actually Evil Lyn in disguise. Of course, anyone who grew up watching the 83 animated series like myself and knows the lore of Evil Lyn, she, much like the Baroness from G.I. Joe, is the master of disguise. Not to mention sorcery. So they take what little magic is left that the sorceress is holding, and it goes into Evil Lyn's wand. Evil Lyn and the sorceress start explaining about how important the magic is to Eternia. It sustains all life, not just in Eternia, but also the universe. And Eternia is the center point of all life in the galaxy, all planets in the galaxy. And the main conductor of all the magic is the Sword of Power. Without the Sword of Power, all the magic is dying. So what ends up happening is Sorceress and Evil Lyn explain that there are two halves to the Power Sword. One's in Pre-Eternia, the Eternian Heaven, and one is in Subternia, the Eternia Hell. So they have to get both halves of the sword and forge it back together. And of course, let's see. Tila wants no part of it. Tila says that she's done with magic. She wants nothing to do with magic. And Cringer is the one who starts talking to her. He says, "Do you remember who gave me the name Cringer?" He said, "You did, because I was a fraidy cat." And he says, as someone who knows what it's like to be afraid, he knows what Tila's going through. And Cringer manages to talk Tila into going on this mission. They have a moment. Tila says, "Good kitty." Of course, Audra's itching to go, itching to be a hero, itching to be able to go on this quest. And Evil Lyn says, "Well, you girls aren't going to be going alone. You're going to need some help." So Evil Lyn ends up going with them. And that leaves off for episode 2. Now, for this review, before I continue on, I am not going to give my thoughts on each and every episode as I go through it. I'm just going to go through each and every episode. Then once I'm done going through the other episodes, I'll give my full thoughts on the entire show, including what I thought of each and every episode. So that moves us on to the most dangerous man in the universe. I'm going to try to make sure that no sound plays. So now we move on to the most dangerous man in Eternia. I know I just said the universe, but it starts off with a flashback scene, and it involves He-Man and Teela. They're on board the ship. As you can see, Merman is there, and he's working alongside Skeletor. And Skeletor is gloating because, let's see, because what ends up happening is He-Man and Teela are thrown overboard, and Skeletor thinks he has a victory at hand as he watches Teela and He-Man toss overboard. Of course, they're underwater, but who should come to Teela and He-Man's rescue? Let's see if I can. But a mysterious armored figure, but we all know who this mysterious armored figure is. It's Man-at-Arms. He shoots a couple lasers at the cuffs that are binding Teela and He-Man. He frees them. Skeletor and Evil Lyn are talking about redecorating the boat when all of a sudden He-Man shows back up and says a corny line after taking care of Skeletor and Merman. And then we flash forward to the present, where Teela says that He-Man had the mind of a teenager. Well, of course, Adam was He-Man. He-Man was Adam. That should be pretty obvious. And of course, we have Evil Lyn here saying that you shouldn't waste your time with boys because, you know, it's all about them. And if it wasn't for them, you could be a great person all on your own. Whereas Audra wants nothing to hear of it from Evil Lyn. But as far as that's concerned, it then focuses on this village where we see this old man who just got some magic water. He ends up tripping, and the people of this village get upset. And they say, how could you drop what little remains of the magic water here in Eternia? Tri-Klops and his religious zealots show up with their technology. They're using a tank, and it blasts a hole at one of the walls. But there's somebody who is intervening. Somebody wearing a cloak. This man right here. This man is wearing a cloak. He's come to not only gather some magic, but also thwart the efforts of Tri-Klops and Trapjaw here. So the fight ensues. Tri-Klops followers use some cables and they tie up Evil Lyn. Evil Lyn and Teela and Audra. And then all of a sudden, when they least expect it, much to Tri-Klops' chagrin, Beastman shows up because Beastman is working with Evil Lyn. He is protecting Evil Lyn at all costs. And Tri-Klops and his forces retreat. Beastman, Evil Lyn, Andra, and Tila look on as they're retreating. And then the hooded figure reveals himself to be Man-at-Arms. Now, if you recall from Episode 1, The Power of Grayskull, Man-at-Arms was stripped of his rank and title and banished from the kingdom. So, Man-at-Arms has been living in this village for an untold period of time. We get back to Man-at-Arms' place, and with the magic water that he has in hand, he says he needs to give it to a friend. Well, as you can see there, that friend that he has to give the water to turns out to be Arco. With the magic leaving Eternia after the power sword was divided, everybody who is capable of wielding magical powers will soon lose those powers. Of course, it's said once again that Eternia will die without all its magic. Man-at-Arms feels bad for what happened, feels bad for letting Tila down, for what happened to Prince Adam, and also being stripped of rank. Of course, he can't do anything about it because he knows that if he returns to the kingdom, that King Randor will have him executed. And Tila says to Man-at-Arms that we need you to help forge the power sword, the two halves of the power sword. And that's when Man-at-Arms says he can't do it and lets him know that if he even steps foot in the kingdom, he'll be executed. But there is someone who can. And of course, Arco and Evil Lyn have an exchange. There's no love lost between Evil Lyn and Arco, more so on the side of Evil Lyn. And they're talking about who's going to reforge the power sword. Well, Roboto shows up, and Roboto is voiced by Justin Long, and he's pretty much doing, an impression of Brent Spiner as Data. That's how it came across to me. It seemed like it was an impression of Data. So their next mission is to go to Preternia. Man-at-Arms grabs his helmet, which he was using it as a fruit bowl, and says that he's going with him. Tila tells him, no, you need to go to Castle Grayskull and protect the sorceress. We'll go to Preternia and recover one half of the power sword. And Man-at-Arms had already asked for forgiveness when he and Tila first reunite. And, Tila has an exchange. She's still pissed off about the secrets being kept from her during the whole time, the magic. And, of course, Adam being He-Man, and the fact that Man-at-Arms knew about it, Arco knew about it, and, of course, Cringer knew about it besides the sorceress. So, Tila and Audra, along with Roboto and Arco, end up going on a boat so they can get to the entrance to Pre-Eternia. And that's also where Evil Lyn and Tila have an exchange. And Tila says to Evil Lyn, why are you still mourning Skeletor? And Evil Lyn counters by saying, well, you're still mourning He-Man. If it wasn't for Skeletor, I would be master of the universe. I would be ruler of Eternia. And you, all you did was run away. Run away and hide. And of course, Arco's upset because, he wants to be able to go on one last mission with Tila, one last adventure, because he mentions to Tila that his happiest times were Tila and He-Man and the gang on their adventures. Of course, Audra doesn't see what the big deal is, and also is wondering why Arco is talking about the past. And he lets her know that his memories are all blending together and that she should have a journal so she can look back on past adventures and remember the good times. Well, as we saw Merman in the beginning of the episode, he and his people show up. They board the ship. There's a fight that ensues. And they're all surrounded by Merman and his men. Merman and Evil Lynn have an exchange saying, and by the way, Merman's voiced by Kevin Conroy. Everybody who's watched Batman the animated series knows exactly who he portrays. I don't think I need to go any further with that. But Merman and Evil Lynn have an exchange saying that they could have ruled Eternia together. He could have been the ruler of the sea. She could have been the ruler of the land with Skeletor out of the way, but that never happened. And of course, as you can see, Merman is missing his right eye. And of course, somebody shows up to save the day. That's right, Man-at-Arms shows up to save the day and helps free Tila, Audra, Evelyn, and Beastman. And then they cut a deal with Beastman's whip around Merman's neck to take them the rest of the way to Subternia. As you can see, this what Evil Lynn is telling Merman right here, saying you will give a safe passage to free Eternia, and then you can be on your way. If you don't, then we will leave you out here to rot, where even the seagulls won't want to eat you. And of course, we see the entrance to Pre-Eternia. They come ashore. Man-at-Arms ends up leaving. Let's see if I can. Man-at-Arms ends up leaving after having a hug with Tila as he heads toward Castle Grayskull. And they arrive to the skull body, decayed body, at the entrance of Pre-Eternia. There's only one way to open the passage, and Evelyn is carrying in her satchel the headpiece of the Havoc staff. So she places it on top of the skeletal body. The eyes start glowing. It grants them passage. And they all proceed to enter through. So that's the end of episode 2. So that was episode 2. I mean, episode 3, The Most Dangerous Man in Eternia. So now we go to the Land of the Dead. And the Land of the Dead has a voice very familiar to Star Trek fans. At least I hope it would be. But we'll get there. So now inside the entrance to Pre-Eternia, and they're actually making their way to the depths of Pre-Eternia. We have Tila, Audra, Arco, and Evil Lyn, along with Beastman, making their way through the depths of Pre-Eternia so they can recover one half of the Power Sword. And as they're making their way, they are paid a visit by someone who has only had an action figure up to this point. And by this glowing green mist, I think a lot of the diehard fans might know who it is, but it actually turns out to be Scareglow, which in some instances, it's been said that he's actually Skeletor, and in other instances, not so much. Let's see if I can bring Scareglow up here. Well, as they're making their way down, Tila and the group are separated. Tila encounters Scareglow, and Evil Lyn and Arco end up on Trolla. And of course, Arco is happy to be back home on Trolla, but they are devastated to find out that no one else is there on Trolla. Meanwhile, Audra, Beastman, and Roboto are dealing with their own problems. They're in a wasteland, and that wasteland is filled with the dead who have been brought to life. So, Tila, in the depths of Pre-Eternia, ends up encountering Scareglow, and she and Scareglow end up cutting a deal. That deal is for Tila's fear in exchange for the other half of the Power Sword. Of course, Tila says that she doesn't have any fear, but we come to find out otherwise. And Scareglow is voiced by Tony Todd. A lot of people know him from the Candyman movies. I know him as Kern, Worf's brother from Star Trek The Next Generation and DS9. So, Scareglow and Tila cut a deal, and Tila is sent into the very heart of Pre-Eternia. Meanwhile, Evil Lyn and Arco are on Trolla. There's a fountain that's filled with magic that all Trollans use to maintain their magic essence. Evil Lyn and Arco have a heart-to-heart. Arco says, "You know what my name really is?" And Evil Lyn says, "Oracle." Yet Arco, when he was young, he was able to say Oracle. It came out Arco. So they start talking, and of course, Arco mentions his parents, because Arco's parents expected him to be full of greatness, and he being Arco feels like he's been a disappointment. Of course, Evil Lyn is looking at her wand because she notices that the power that remains is getting weaker, and she forms this eagle and starts talking about magic and how important it is, not only to her, but to anyone who wields magic. And as they're talking, the dead spirits of fellow Trollans start coming out of the shadows, which is actually a callback to the animated series in '83, where there was some evil shadow creatures who took the form of Arco, and they formed that beast. Evil Lyn and Arco have to run. Meanwhile, one of the trials that Tila is facing is the evil version of He-Man. Of course, what ends up happening there is the evil version of He-Man starts telling her that she fears basically her own failures and being unable to not only save Adam, but also being denied the secrets of Castle Grayskull itself in terms of not being told what was going on. And of course, having resentment toward everybody and also being left alone. Meanwhile, Audra, Roboto, and Beastman are dealing with the Walking Dead and also some flying bats. And Audra is scared, which is helping to power the dead that are attacking them. Meanwhile, Roboto turns into Mega Man and starts blasting away. And of course, we cut back to Evelyn and Arco dealing with the Beast. Then we cut back to Tila, and she's fighting off the apparition of He-Man. She manages to defeat that He-Man until she has to face her past self. And her past self keeps reminding her about what a failure she is and how she just gave up, how she's full of fear. But Tila manages to defeat her evil doppelganger and then is confronted by Scareglow again and says, okay, we had a deal. Your fear for the sword. And Tila reneges on that deal and tries to escape. Meanwhile, Orko and Evelyn are still in Trala when everything goes back to normal after Tila is able to successfully get the one half of the power sword before going back on that deal. And I know I'm going all over the place, so I do apologize. So Tila ends up leaving. Everyone is reunited. They see that Tila has one half of the power sword, and as they're trying to escape, they have to open a doorway to Pre-Eternia, which Evelyn does by using her wand and the one half of the power sword to open the doorway to Pre-Eternia, as you can see right here. And then Scareglow shows up and he says, nah, we had a deal. Your soul, your fear. And he tries to hold everyone back. Of course, Arco being able to fly isn't caught. And of course, Arco uses magic to get these stalactites, and he throws them at Scareglow, and Scareglow dodges them. And then Arco decides he's going to sacrifice himself by using his magic while everyone else escapes. And of course, Arco is blocking Scareglow's magic. Evelyn and Beastman try to help, especially Evelyn, but Evelyn is too weak and she faints into Beastman's arms. Everybody tries to escape to Pre-Eternia. Of course, Scareglow and Arco are battling. Arco is able to get one of these rings around Scareglow, but not this one. And then what ends up happening is there's a blast. Arco is no more. Everybody is blown into the door to Pre-Eternia. All that's left of Arco is a scarf, part of the scarf. And everybody is sad for a moment. And then they hear a familiar voice. That familiar voice turns out to be Prince Adam. So Prince Adam is there, and he's wondering why they're all there. He even goes by the power of Grayskull. So that's the end of episode 4. Now on to episode 5. So episode 5 begins where episode 4 left off. They're mourning the death of Arco, and they create a grave marker for him. Adam gives him the other half of the Sword of Power. Teela has strong resentment toward Adam for not only keeping the secret of He-Man from her, but also dying. So they mention that the Force has a familiar friend that'll give Arco a piece of Trala, and that familiar friend turns out to be Boss Man. Again, Teela and Adam are talking, and Adam's trying to ease the tension, but Teela is still upset with the fact that secrets were kept from her. We're introduced to Hero, who's been an action figure for a while, but we're introduced to him. He's asked if he could piece the two halves of the sword together. Of course, he's incapable of doing it because, as you can see, he does not have the sword facing in the correct direction. So they need to create a forgery. And Roboto offers himself his capabilities, since he has the capabilities of Duncan to do so. So they use this hall that they're in to create a giant forge. And of course, we're introduced to Vicor and Neela, and they're participating in a race. And we even get Pre-Eternia He-Man. And of course, Teela and Adam are on their hoverboards. Forget the first initial name of them. But they're on their way to meet up with King Grayskull. They start telling King Grayskull what happens. Of course, King Grayskull mentions how important it was for, the Power Sword to be protected, and that Castle Grayskull itself was named in his honor, which was not the case when we learned it in the 2002 He-Man series. Both King Grayskull and Adam are relatives. Adam's a descendant of King Grayskull, and it's because of King Grayskull and Castle Grayskull itself that the power has been passed down. So Teela and King Grayskull, and of course Adam, are talking about a doorway to return to Eternia. Of course, King Grayskull reminds Adam that he cannot, because he's been given this reward to go into Pre-Eternia, the Eternian afterlife, and it's a great reward, and nobody has ever gone back. So, getting back into the hall, the two pieces are set on this marble table. Roboto gets to work after Evil Lynn releases the last bit of magic and starts piecing together the two halves of the sword. And of course, Teela again is still upset with Adam for what happened. She has a few regrets. Of course, Adam says to her, "I died, Teela. What can I do?" How bad could things be on Eternia? Tell me. That sort of stuff. Of course, Tila, she's giving Adam a hard time, all because she was kept out of the secret. And how things have changed on Eternia since his death. Of course, He-Man, aka Adam, and Mossman have a conversation. And Adam asks, has anyone ever returned from death? And Mossman, being a mystical figure, mystical creature, says, well, I don't really know because it's never been happened before because I'm still on Eternia. Just only part of me is gone. So we see Roboto forging together the new power sword. Takes the one half of the power sword and returns the power to it. Takes the other part of the power sword. It gets its power. Of course, that power was in his arc reactor. I mean, that's what it looked like. I know it wasn't. It was his power source, but it looked like an arc reactor. And we see Roboto piece both halves of the power sword together. Let's see. And both halves come together. There's an explosion. They run back in to the room where they see Roboto lying on the floor. He's missing a few pieces. He ends up joining the Allspark. Okay, I know the Allspark is Transformers, but anyhow, after that happens, Tila is given the power sword. She is going to make her way back to Eternia with the doorway now open. Adam wants to go with them because he says, without me, who can call on the power of Grayskull? And he's told there have been many who have come before you, and there will be those who come after you who will be able to call on the power of Grayskull. Everybody gives her goodbyes. And we arrive once again at the doorstep of Castle Grayskull. Adam trips on a rock. He's saved by Beastman. And of course, it's Tri-Klops gang that's attacking Castle Grayskull to get rid of all the magic because they're all technological. Man-at-Arms is there to help protect the sorceress. They end up fighting off Tri-Klops men. They get inside Castle Grayskull. And there's a tearful reunion between Adam and Cringer when Cringer sees Adam and Adam reveals that he's alive. Duncan says, how is this possible? And then we're brought to the sorceress. And we go back into the very same chamber where we saw in episode 1, where Skeletor was able to get the orb of power of the elders and shatter it. And then, of course, there's only one way to bring the power back to all of Eternia, all of the magic back to all of Eternia. And Adam calls on the power of Grayskull. There's lightning, there's thunder, there's magic. The sorceress is regenerating. The orb is regenerating. It's put back in its chamber. Let's see. Oops, spoiler. But Castle Grayskull, as you can see down in the corner, is reformed. Tri-Klops and his group retreat. And what ends up happening is the Havoc staff reforms as Adam calls on the power of Grayskull and is about to transform into He-Man. Skeletor reforms. And he ends up stabbing Adam in the back. Adam is lying there dying on the ground. Skeletor says that he hid himself inside Evelyn's wand to protect his essence and was waiting for the right moment to strike, and commands Evelyn to stand at his side. Evelyn, as you can see, reluctantly is obeying, or is she? Skeletor is very pleased that Evelyn is going to join him. Puts this brace around Audra, and Teela's upset, of course, rightfully so. Adam is dying and wants to know why Evelyn can do what she did. And of course, Skeletor gives her a speech saying, "You of all people should know of disappointment, Captain. Well, with Evelyn now rejoining me, you should be greatly disappointed." And then Skeletor introduces himself to Audra, saying, "I'm Skeletor." And then Skeletor calls on the power of Grayskull. And there's smoke, there's fire, and Skeletor transforms into Scarecrow. So, that's it for part 1 of Masters of the Universe Revelation, episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what did I think of it? Well, honestly, I'm not that impressed with the series. I'm really not that impressed with it. Yeah, there are some nice little callbacks to the 83 series. Very little to do, if anything, with the 2002 series or even New Adventures. But, this series has taken a different tone, and I realize it's supposed to be more for adults. But in episode 2, you already knew, once you saw that old woman, who it actually was. You already knew it was Evelyn. And with it being Evelyn, you start wondering, what sort of scheme is she starting up now? And of course, we find out that she's going after the chalice, which is actually the main part of the Havoc staff. And, there's animosity between Evelyn and Teela still. But the surprise being that Sorceress and Evelyn are working together. Of course, the Sorceress says, "I'm sort of allowing you to work with me here in order to save our home, save our planet." And, Teela is still bitter about being lied to, having the secret held from her. And, that continues on into episode 3, episode 4, episode 5, where Teela's just angry and bitter about having the secret kept from her. But as I had mentioned in Friday's review, the more people that would have found out about Adam's secret about being He-Man and having the power sword and the power of Grayskull, more dangerous it would have been, not only for himself, but for his friends and for his family and the people of Eternia. If Skeletor saw, wait a minute, Prince Adam is King Randor's son, and Prince Adam is also He-Man. So I can put Adam in this predicament and force him to give me the power sword. Of course, that never happened in the original animated series in 83 by Filmation, or the Mike Young Productions 2002 He-Man series. But, the less people who don't need to know about this particular type of secret when it comes to Masters of the Universe, the better. You want to keep it in a close, tight-knit group, and that's pretty much what it needed to be. Now, Teela being upset continues on to episode 3, even though Audra is ready to be a hero. And we, meet up with Man-at-Arms, who's, disgraced. He's been stripped of his rank. He's been living in this village for a while, and he's been protecting his dear friend Arco, because Arco is dying with all the magic gone. And of course, Tila still has resentment toward Duncan for keeping a secret. Well, I'd hate to see what happens in the next chapter when Tila finds out that A, she's adopted, and B, her mother's the sorceress. Spoiler alert there for anyone who didn't know. But Tila is the adopted daughter of Man-at-Arms, and her mother is a sorceress. Tila is supposed to become the sorceress of Castle Grayskull, wearing the snake armor that she used to wear in the 83 toy line. She wore it in the 2002 toy line, and even in the 2002 series when the Snake Men appeared, led by Keen Hiss in that series. And of course, we had Cobra Khan in both series. But Tila is supposed to become the goddess, the new guardian of Castle Grayskull. There's even a comic out there where Tila and Adam get married, and at one point, Adam is permanently transformed into He-Man, and the power is actually passed down to their son. But, with episode 3 reintroducing Merman, and Merman being voiced by Kevin Conroy, I missed, the previous incarnations of Merman where you had that gurgling sound as he spoke. Where in this version, it was just, Kevin Conroy speaking normally, and I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think it really served the character all that well. When you get so used to hearing the character sound something like this, to him just speaking clearly, it's like, what? But I digress. Merman, that's part of the iconic way. I mean, Alan Oppenheimer, he voices Mothman in this series. He was the original voice of Merman, the original voice of Cringer, Man-at-Arms, Skeletor, and a few other characters on the original series. And he's the one that started off with the grrr type of voice. Skeletor. It was like that. But Kevin Conroy, was doing what he was told, of course. And we didn't get that. And, the fact that Skeletor's forces are now divided without Skeletor being there, well, I think the person that could have brought them in and held the reins was Evelyn herself. But we didn't see that happen. And then, of course, in episode 4, when we meet Scarecrow for the first time in any incarnation of the series, whether it be He-Man and the Masters of the Universe 83 and 2002, or He-Man, the New Adventures of He-Man, meeting Scarecrow for the first time. I thought that was pretty good. I did think that was pretty good. And that was pretty cool, considering the action figure had been released back in the original toy line. Even the classics line had Scarecrow. So, that was pretty good. But, with everything being about how Tila is feeling, and don't get me wrong. I know what it's like to lose people you love. I've lost both my mother and father. I've lost uncles. I've lost friends. I know what it's like. I know the stages of grief all too well. Losing my grandparents. And again, losing my parents. I know the stages of grief. But to hold the bitterness and resentment for however long it's been from the time we see Tila in episode 1 to episode 2, since again, the timeline isn't really, expressed as to how far ahead they've actually gone since that period of time. But, for Tila to still hold anger and resentment, eventually, at least for some, that subsides. I can't talk for anyone else. I can only speak from my own experience. And yes, you do go through the grieving period where you're sad. And, there are some days where it seems like the littlest thing will set you off. But, there also are days where, you just think of all the fond memories and it brings a smile to your face. I think that only people who have been through the loss of a friend, a loved one, a pet, even, only those people could really truly understand. I'm not saying that other people don't understand, but like I said, having lost both my mother and father, I know that pain, I know that hurt, but again, there are days where I focus on the happy memories that I have with them, and the conversations we used to have. And but for Tila to flat out have bitterness still for Adam when she's fighting off against the He-Man demon and everything, and even in episode 5 where she and Adam are talking and still having resentment, and Adam even says, Tila, I died. To have that bitterness and resentment, I mean, to me, if that was happening to me, someone would probably tell me I need to seek professional help. See a counselor for my grief. So, I really don't agree with that direction for Tila. And, for Skeletor to be able to obtain, the Sword of Power as Adam is getting ready to transform into He-Man, I would think, and this is just my perspective on this, I would think that, once they have forged the Sword of Power and they left Pre-Eternia and Adam calls on the power of Grayskull, when he's in the middle of that transformation sequence, he's impenetrable. And, not only that, for anyone who watched the Filmation animated series, He-Man was pretty much like Superman with some of the abilities he had. He had the ability to, have powerful wind come and, blow out fires, ice, and, be able to crush things. And, as far as magic, he used the Sword of Power a lot of times to deflect magic, to deflect laser beams. And, for Adam to go out the way he did, being stabbed in the back, and to die twice, and for anyone who says that Kevin Smith isn't happy about that, watch the post show. Watch the Masters of the Universe Revelation post show that they have up on Netflix. He's happy about it. You can see it in his face. You can hear it in his voice how happy he is about being able to kill off Adam / He-Man not once, but twice. That to me tells you everything. That despite what Kevin Smith says, despite what Mattel says and anyone else says, they are here to throw a monkey wrench in everything that we knew and destroy what we knew, from the comics to the animated series. Heck, even the 1987 movie with Dolph Lundgren, that's looking good right now. But you could tell that Kevin Smith is not a fan of Masters of the Universe, and it's out there where he says in his show Comic Book Men, where he's not a fan of Masters of the Universe. I saw that episode, and It didn't really surprise me, mainly because of how old he would have been at the time the series premiered. Unlike me, where I was 5 years old when the first He-Man and the Masters of the Universe series premiered. I was the age where they wanted to capture the attention, the imagination at the time. Kevin Smith, he wasn't that age. He's what? I think he's got to be 8 years older than me, so he would have been 13. So, as far as cartoons are concerned, I don't think, especially back then, he would have been that into cartoons. And Kevin Smith, all he's looking at this as is a paycheck. That's all this is to him. He doesn't care what expectations the fans might have. That's none of his concern. And it really is none of his concern. What he wants to do is create his own vision of Masters of the Universe, which you got to start looking at it that way, that it has nothing to do with the Filmation series, nothing to do with the 2002 Mike Young series. This is its own separate entity, especially when you dig deeper into the rights for Masters of the Universe between Mattel and a few other parties. So you got to look at this in its own different universe, its own different continuity. And does that make it any better? No, it doesn't, because for over a year now, they were hyping this as the spiritual sequel series to the Filmation series. And it is anything but that. It truly is anything but that. And, it is the bait and switch. It really is the bait and switch here. He said it was going to be one thing. It turns out to be another thing. And, to me, that's disingenuous. That is completely disingenuous. How could you go in and make a series for fans like myself who grew up on Masters of the Universe? How could you go in and say this is something that you guys are going to love? And I know, there's still another half of 5 episodes. But how could you go in with these first halves and produce something like this? That's what I don't get. And no, I don't work in Hollywood. I don't ever want to work in Hollywood because of how two-faced you'd have to be to work in Hollywood. And that's something I do not want. I am going on record right now saying I do not want that. But how in the world can you hype up this as the spiritual successor to the classic 1983 animated series when it's nothing of the sort? It is nothing of the sort. And I know I mentioned this during Friday's review with my friend Aaron, aka TKO, but to throw Clownfish TV under the bus and saying they're wrong when they were right and they only got it from a source of theirs, that's shady. And even last night during his live stream, what he mentioned about Rotten Tomatoes and Netflix not giving a hoot about, and I'm trying to keep myself from cursing in this. I really am. Even though I have the disclaimer, as always, I am trying to keep myself from cursing. Netflix and Rotten Tomatoes could give a hoot about the fan scores. Wrong. You look at his facial expression in that live stream last night, and even the guy that was with him, you look at their facial expressions, they know they screwed up. They know they screwed up royally. And, I used to write Star Trek fan fiction back in the day. And, of course, I look at some of those stories that I wrote now and I think, this could have been a whole lot better. But even with that being said, you want to build up a story that gets your audience hooked from the beginning. And yes, people can say that the death of He-Man should be able to get the fans hooked right away. The death of Adam, He-Man, the death of Skeletor should be able to get fans hooked in right away. And yeah, you'd be absolutely right. But then to go about it and have one of your main characters, one of your main characters who wasn't really a supporting character, she was a main character, and that main character being Teela. Well, to have her act the way she's acting, it's completely out of character. It is completely out of character for Teela, because as we had seen both in the 83 series and the 2002 series, and definitely in the comic books, she fought side by side with Adam, with He-Man. She would do anything to protect him, anything to help him. She would risk her own life to save him. And, some people might say, well, that was her duty. And as captain of the guard, that was her duty to protect Adam. That was Man-at-Arms' duty to protect Adam. And you would be correct. But the relationship they built, what was being laid down, the foundation that was being laid down for Teela to become the sorceress of Castle Grayskull, the fact that she was the daughter of the sorceress, that foundation, the foundation that was laid down in 1981, the foundation that is Gen Xers like myself who started that foundation for this franchise, fell in love with this franchise. Yes, 5 years old, doesn't matter. Growing up with the action figures, the role play of the glow-in-the-dark power sword, and it came with the shield, and there was even, a small Havoc staff, and the sword if you wanted to be Skeletor. But still, for all of that, growing up, the costumes, and I'm talking about the vinyl costumes where you put that mask on and you can barely breathe. Where kids would dress up as He-Man, kids would dress up as Skeletor, kids would dress up as She-Ra. That foundation that was laid down. And of course, we get the New Adventures of He-Man, and that went nowhere. That only lasted one season. I remember seeing the toys on toy shelves and peg hooks growing up and being completely disinterested. Of course, at that time there was Ninja Turtles and a few other things out. The Star Trek figures would be coming soon in the early 90s. So, my attention was also being diverted to more adult-oriented TV shows. I was getting into Star Trek at the time. So, I didn't really care too much. But, to basically put a middle finger out there at the fans, regardless of how he feels about it or not, it is a middle finger to the fans when, you say, we're going to subvert your expectations. Well, that's the new key term in Hollywood for saying we're going to take everything that you love about this show as a kid, as an adult, everything you loved about this movie, everything you loved about this book, and toss it out the window and make our own story, but use this name only. Use this in name only. Use this show in name only. Use this book in name only. Use this movie in name only. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to create something and use something like Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and I hope they never touch it. I hope they never touch Babylon 5. But if you're going to use a pre-established franchise, RoboCop comes to mind. Indiana Jones, I really don't think there should be a fifth one. I really don't think there should have been a fourth one. It was wrapped up in a nice little bow with, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Temple of Doom, and the Last Crusade. But if you're going to take a franchise and then create something completely different, then create your own franchise. Create your own property. Don't use a pre-established property just because you want to get name recognition and then toss everything out that's already been established about that said franchise and act like it doesn't matter. Because to fans, it does matter. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of science fiction, fantasy, drama, whatever, comedies. If there's a particular, comedy series that you like, comedy series of movies, there are certain things that you expect in them. Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, and Goldmember. Now, what do they all have in common? They all had some sort of connecting point. That connecting point was Austin. It was 60s. It went into the 70s, of course, with The Spy Who Shagged Me. But still, it all had a focal point, and that being Austin Powers and Dr. Evil and the henchmen that they used to use in the past. And, of course, there's been talks of a fourth Austin Powers movie. I really hope not. But, don't just go into these franchises and throw a wrench into the gears and destroy it. It's not right. It really isn't right. And I know somebody's going to say, well, nobody cares what you think, Mike. Of course, Hollywood doesn't care what I think. But they might start caring what I think when I start canceling more services. I've already canceled my Disney Plus. I only reactivated my Netflix subscription so I can review this Masters of the Universe Revelation series, and then the Transformers War for Cybertron trilogy, with the third chapter being available next week on Netflix. Now, with that, I may do reviews of each part separately and then do a whole overview of everything. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with that. But, that's another franchise that, has already gone through the rains, gone through the mud with the Michael Bay films. Yeah, I went and saw the Michael Bay films, but looking back at them, they're horrible, horrible movies. They are absolutely horrible movies. And then you hear about Seth Rogen going and being the head writer for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't know. It's I don't think it's going to be any good, because you want to know the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie? The best one was one that came out in 1990. The first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie was the best one. All the other ones after that fell flat. Yes, Secret of the Ooze was more in line with the 87 series with the comedy and jokes and shenanigans. But as far as being true to the comics and just being a good movie in general, despite, the flaws where you can see certain production crew members and the boom mic and everything, the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie even see in 2007 was the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie released in 1990. Best Transformers movie, despite the fact that, Optimus Prime died, was the 86 Transformers movie, the movie that came out 35 years ago. That movie that came out 35 years ago. The best Star Trek movie, in my opinion, of all the Star Trek movies, the best one of them all, and Star Trek's 55 years of being around, being a franchise, the best one is The Wrath of Khan. The Undiscovered Country is a strong number 2 for me. But, with Masters of the Universe Revelation, I probably will at some point when the second half is released give a review for that. But from what I've seen of this first half, I'm really not impressed. And let me shift gears onto the voice cast. Sarah Michelle Gellar and Mark Hamill. Well, I'm just going to let you all know that every time I hear Mark Hamill in this Masters of the Universe Revelation, I don't see Skeletor. I see the Joker. All I hear is the Joker. And if you haven't heard me do an impression of the Joker, watch part 1, and you'll hear me during that video do an impression of the Joker. But that's all I am hearing in this. That's all I'm hearing, the Joker. And Sarah Michelle Gellar, I'm sorry, I think she was miscast as Teela. I think they needed somebody with stronger acting skills to pull off Teela. Who? Currently, I really don't know. I'm going to be honest with that. I really don't know who would have been a good choice. I think that if you were going to cast somebody as Teela, she would have to have some sort of voice presence to her. I mean, if you want my honest opinion of who I'm thinking of right now who could have pulled off Teela, because let's face it, they kind of run together anyway. Well, why not Lucy Lawless? She would have been a good Teela. Other than, being Xena, and, she was in the Battlestar Galactica reboot, and she was real good in that. I think Lawless could have been a good Teela. Or, Virginia Madsen, Kerry Russell. Heck, Jerry Ryan would have been a good Teela compared to Sarah Michelle Gellar. Terry Farrell. I mean, if I'm thinking of Star Trek actresses, Nana Visitor definitely could have been a good Teela. But I don't. Sarah Michelle Gellar was strong enough to be Teela. Now, Lena Headey as Evelyn, yeah, her voice works for Evelyn. She did a great job as Evelyn. And Stephen Root as Cringer. Well, I was expecting Cringer to sound a little bit more like he did in the 83 series. Being a coward. But we didn't get that. Heck, I wouldn't even accept a Bill Daltrey, if he had done that voice. But we didn't get that. And as far as the voice actor who was He-Man, I'm not even familiar with any of his work, to be perfectly honest with I mean, let's see what he's been in anyway. More than likely, it's probably been shows I've never watched. And, you know, like I said, with Justin Long as Roboto, he was just doing a Brent Spiner and Data impression. Now, Diedrich Bader as Trapjaw, well, that was okay. Henry Tri-Klops, well, didn't really care. No, I did like Dennis Haysbert as King Grayskull. And, you know, Tony Todd as Scareglow. And let's see, Tiffany Smith as Audra. You know, that was all right. But as far as Liam Cunningham, let me see if I've seen him in anything, and didn't even know it. And then I'll go back and read about Adam / He-Man's voice actor. Well, no, I haven't seen him in any of the shows that are being listed. Now, as far as He-Man's / Adam's voice actor, Chris Wood, no, I've never watched Containment. I haven't seen a single episode of Supergirl. I have never watched The Vampire Diaries. 30-something else, never heard of it before. Legacies. Well, he was in Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. I didn't care for Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. I turned that off. Mercy Street, never seen that. Comedy Bang Bang, never saw that. Girls, never saw that. And The Carrie Diaries, never saw that. But I would imagine it would be based on Stephen King's Carrie, if I were to take an educated guess. So, you know, I haven't seen him in anything. Let's see. Well, Cree Summer was the priestess who Tila and Audra recovered the magic glove for, so I do know who Cree Summers is. If you ever watched Inspector Gadget back in the 80s, you know, she was Penny, and then she was Elmira in Tiny Toons. She's was also in Drawn Together. She was in Rugrats and several other animated series. So, and another voice I do recognize is Kevin Michael Richardson. I'm familiar with his work, and you know he's been a part of DC, Marvel, their animated shows. He was in doing voices for Mortal Kombat, and he's been in Family Guy, Simpsons, Animaniacs, at least the newer version of Animaniacs, not, first iteration. Let's see. He was also in Transformers Prime. He was Bulkhead. Let's see, anything else I can think of that he was in? I don't know. All these projects run together. So, trying to think of who was in what. And then Griffin Newman, who voiced Arco. Well, I never watched Draft Day. I've never seen No Kiss List or A Rainy Day in New York. Never watched The Tick when it was on Amazon. But apparently, looking at his IMDb page, he's not only in this Masters of the Universe Revelation, but he's also in the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe that's coming out later on this year. So let's see who's in that. Well, Dietrich Bader is going to be King Randor. Of course, Sarah Michelle Gellar is going to be Teela. I wonder if this is correct. Because it looks like it has the same voice cast as Masters of the Universe, so I don't know if this is entirely correct. Of course, Alicia Silverstone, yeah, everybody knows that she became famous in Clueless, and then of course she was in Batman and Robin, well, a few other movies, but yeah. Other than, Mark Hamill, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Dietrich Bader, everybody who's seen Office Space knows that he's in Office Space and he was in the Drew Carey show. And he's been around, as far as entertainment is concerned. Susan Eisenberg, that name seems familiar. But oh yeah, she was Wonder Woman in Justice League. No wonder. But yeah. So my final thoughts on this incarnation of Masters in the Universe is that this first half is a letdown, and it does remain to be seen what's going to happen in the second half. Will my interest even be there to watch it in the second half? If I'm going to tell you tonight, I really don't have any interest in watching the second half. I really don't. This first half, if it's going to be more of Teela moaning and groaning and pouting, well, then I don't want to watch a show that's going to be like that. I just don't. And I don't believe it's part of me, moving on out of the sci-fi fantasy genre. I know it's because I'm just tired of Hollywood taking these franchises that I personally enjoyed at one time or another and taking them and throwing away everything that was established in these franchises. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the only one. But that's all right. I do want to thank anyone who stopped by tonight's review of part 2 of Masters of the Universe Revelation, going over episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5. Really do appreciate anyone who stopped by. If you like what you saw here, give this video a thumbs up. Share this video with your friends. subscribe to the Pacific414 YouTube channel. The description does contain links to my social media, but I will bring them up here real quick. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/Pacific414, Instagram, and the link to my Discord page is also down in the description below. Thank you all very much for watching and listening to me stutter, stop, ramble, and just run my mouth for almost 2 hours about Masters of the Universe Revelations. Really do appreciate it. Hope you all have a great night, and I will see you all later. Take care.